Welcome, Wargamers. This is Doug with 2+ Stuff, and today we are exploring the lore behind the Beastclaw Raiders. This video was requested by Joseph Tipton. And if you have a lore question you'd like answered, go ahead and click subscribe and leave it in the comments down below. And with that out of the way, let's dig into the Beastclaw Raiders. Now, what we know as the Beastclaw Raiders are actually a series of tribes which are called Alfrostans, and they live a purely nomadic tribal lifestyle. They are led singularly by their hunter/chieftain called a Frost Lord. And this giant nomadic tribe is organized very, very well, actually. It's very structured. They are the Jorlbads and the Earlbads. And this is really the sword and the shield, okay? So the Jorlbad is the sword. They are the aggression style, or part of the arm of the army, where they're going to go down and run and smash down enemy defense. It's going to be that first wave. And the Earlbad, the shield, is there specifically to take care of counter assaults. So you see how this one tribe functions. Again, it's from the ground up structured like this. There's more organization chambers and things like that, but this is it for the most part when it comes to warfare and hunting. Very structured, very organized, and they have a very disciplined lifestyle because of it. But what makes that different from, say, a pack of gutbusters who are just kind of well organized under a leader? Well, the Everwinter does. And so when I talk about the Beastclaw Raiders, really there's going to be three things that we split them up by that define them against other Oggurs, and that is the Everwinter, the Hunger, and their steeds. So diving into the Everwinter. Put it out there, the origins of this thing are unknown. There was a point in time where Games Workshop put out battle tomes that really didn't answer a lot of questions. Like the Seraphon one in particular. I think this was another one where they didn't give us enough information. Personally, I don't think that. But there are a few kind of stories of where people think that the Everwinter came from. One of them is that they did something wrong to Gorka Morka and he punished them by having this ice storm follow them. Another one's kind of the same story, but Sigmar did it, for example. Things like that. So its origins are unknown, but we kind of have a good idea of what it is, which is a perpetual supernatural ice storm that follows every single tribe descended from the original Beastclaw Raiders one. And if the tribe stays still for too long, they kind of camp out in one area, they'll freeze solid for hundreds of years. Now, it's important to note that the storm cannot actually kill them. They just lay in a dormant state. The reason I find that interesting and pointed out is because that sounds like the punishment stories make more sense. Meaning, if Gorka Morka has no need to kill them, he just has to freeze them for a while, right? I mean, just to teach them a lesson. You don't necessarily kill the people you're trying to reprimand. And they lay in this dormant state for some time until the warmth of blood, or the sound of battle, or the heat of sorcery, something wakes them up and they're able to shake off the ice. Now, what's interesting is this all sounds very negative, right? The idea of a punishment, that they're constantly on the run, that there's serious consequences for staying still, those kinds of things. We get that that's a punishment. What's interesting is that the Beastclaw Raiders actually revere, almost on a religious level, the storm itself. The Everwinter is a huge part of their culture and identity and religion almost. They see it as their god, either Gork and Mork or Gorka Morka when they're combined together. They see his very nature in the storm. And this takes interesting ways of displaying itself, meaning the storm will freeze their enemies ahead of them and kind of get them stuck in snow so they're slower, so that the Beastclaw Raiders come up and then eat them. So in that sense, this punishment is almost a blessing because it's helping them capture food and prey. And as such, over time, they have begun to perceive Gorka Morka as the god of winter and the storm. And just putting a point right here, maybe the punishment reminds them that their god is real in some capacity, right? It's this constant reminder that this is not just a bad legend, it's not just, an idle story, that this is reality. I'm not quite sure. I have trouble rationalizing the stories that say this is a punishment and that they've banished the Beastclaw Raiders in some capacity with the fact that that's this worship of the same thing. But moving on, we're going to talk about the Hunger. Now, what am I talking about? Well, Oggurs have one drive. That's food. Consumption is actually a very heavy theme in this army. Because if you have followed the Warhammer Fantasy battles, or even to now any kind of gutbuster lore that you can find, Oggurs eat anything. Just about anything. They'll eat living people, dead meat, rotten meat, doesn't matter. They'll eat anything. Now, they don't eat their mounts for a few reasons that we'll get to in a little bit. And they don't eat their dead, which is interesting. They make a point of that the gutbusters do. The other kind of more generic Oggurs do eat their dead, but these guys do not. They have this religious connotation that the dead belong to the storm, and so when one of these guys dies, they leave the body alone. Which, in a society that eats everything and values food and consumption so highly, that is actually a really, really big deal. Now, as you can imagine, this puts them in stark contrast with demons, Seraphon, Nighthaunt, things like that, because they can't eat them. There's nothing there to eat. And at first, they felt the same way about Stormcast Eternals. You kill one to go eat him, and all of a sudden he turns to lightning and flies away. However, they found out something really, really interesting, which is that whenever the Stormcast Eternals are around, meat seems to come to them, meaning, the book is kind of written in the BCR perspective, so they don't really understand, but what's happening is Sigmar sees a threat that's living, sends Stormcast Eternals to attack it, the Beastclaw Raiders roll up, Stormcast Eternals die, and then whatever force that they were fighting now gets eaten by the BCR, so they can't eat Stormcast, but they noticed a pattern where wherever they are, food is nearby, and that's kind of cool. I like the fact that Stormcast are almost a good omen for food. And more than all these things, food actually dictates their government. So when a Frost Lord dies, and they have no leader and they're trying to decide who's going to take command, everyone who's kind of in the running for that office goes on a hunt. They go on a hunt and they try to bring back the biggest creature that they can find. They lay it out there before the entire tribe, and they let the tribe eat. Now, here's the thing. Whoever's meat is eaten by the most members of their tribe is the elected Frost Lord. Now, this means a few things. One, you have to get the tastiest, meat, but also you have to get an animal that is large enough for you to accrue that many quote-unquote votes. So you, as a normal Beastclaw Raider, are voting for your chieftain based on whose food you eat and how much of it. And this is really, really interesting, because what it means is, kind of stepping backwards a little bit, leadership is based on your ability to provide for your clan. In addition to that, food is currency and survival, and it adds worth to the individual. If they can hunt and gather food for everyone, then they are a worthy person to lead us. And so the last little part of the Beastclaw Raiders I want to talk about here is the steeds, because what really does separate them a lot thematically from Gutbusters and other things like that is the fact that every single one of these dudes mounted. They are all riding something. And there's a reason that they don't eat them, and they're all very different. I think the simple fact that they couldn't be where they are out chasing this storm that's perpetually following them without this kind of mobile transportation means that these creatures are equally as important to the beliefs and kind of functionality of these tribes. So the first one is the Stonehorn. And Stonehorn has a skeleton that is made of rock and gem, and he eats metals and more rocks and all kinds of crazy stuff. They use these guys to smash through fortifications, then once the walls are down, they basically let the Stonehorns just mull around and eat them being the fortresses, the walls, the fortifications, things like that. And as such, they have a very symbiotic relationship with the BCR, meaning that if you have a fortress full of people, the BCR will smash down the wall, the Stonehorns will eat the walls themselves, and the Beastclaw Raiders will eat everyone inside. One thing that I like that the book brought up is that their tusks turn the hue, like color-wise, of things that they're eating. So you could have metallic tusks and things like that. You could have jade and all kinds of materials and like diamond and all kinds of cool things like that on the tusk of these Stonehorns because of that fact. And much like the Beastclaw Raiders themselves, these guys also have to be in perpetual motion. There's no curse against them necessarily, but if a Stonehorn stays still for too long, rock will literally build up in the kind of crevices of its skeleton and it'll be stuck there. It'll become a living statue. Which is interesting that they have a different reason for the same lifestyle that the Beastclaw Raiders do. And the next steed they have is the Thunder Tusk. Now, these ones are very interesting. They actually have a mythos kind of built up around them, but really what they are is they somehow channel the idea of the Everwinter. That's their beliefs anyway. And this channeling of the Everwinter itself seems to amplify when Thunder Tusks are in large groups. And they have a myth around this where Gorkamorka was climbing the highest mountain in all the mortal realms. And as he was reaching the top of it, ice started to form on his fingertips, and as the shards of ice fell to the earth, they hit the ground and became the first Thunder Tusks. Things like that. I mean, this kind of outlandish myth built around them, but what included in that is that they're born of, one, their deity, Gorkamorka, but also, two, that they are somehow imbued on a deep level with cold, frost, and the storm. And these guys are not eaten because there's a great sense of reverence for these monsters because they have that religious tone and aspect to their mythos. And this takes form in rules as well, that when someone rides Huskard in particular rides with Thundertusk, he kind of gets more like a priest type profile. They are able to channel the storm into an ice attack that you can use in the game. Very, very thematic, things like that. And the last creature that they ride is the Fang, which I think is by far the most interesting in terms of backstory. And these are really going to be the cavalry for your infantry level dudes. Now, if you've seen the model, they actually have kind of a bulldog face. They have very short-sighted on purpose, and because it makes them great for charging. They don't know what they're about to ram into, so they don't ever try to halt and slow down because they see something they don't want to hit. They just barrel straight through anything. They are often starved, like withheld food from them, to increase their aggression. And the reason that they're generally not eaten is because Beastclaw Raiders treat these guys much like a weapon rather than a ride. By that I mean, you take care of your weapon and it takes care of you. There's a lot of personality and bonding between man and beast when it comes to Fang specifically. Now, they will eat them if there's a massive food shortage for an extended period of time, but that's very, very rare. So how do you get a Fang cav the way you want it? Well, they have this cool little process that is just both equally horrific and amazing. What you do is you get a bunch of pups from Fang mothers and you throw them into a pit, and you let natural selection take its place. You throw some food down there, but you leave it alone for a while, and eventually they'll eat the food that you left down there, and then they'll start devouring the weakest among them, and they'll just start fighting each other for every resource available. Right? You let natural selection take its place. When they get a little bigger, the Frost Lord, leader of the entire tribe, comes, lines them all up for inspection, and he offers them 2 hands, right? Puts his hands out right in front of them. One hand has meat in it, and the other one is empty. Whoever bites the hand that is empty is taken to become a Fang cavalry unit. Whoever bites the hand that has meat in it is turned to dinner that night. Now, why do that? Well, because they want the beast to be solely focused on hurting someone, not on self-preservation. So if you bite the hand that's empty, it's because you want to hurt the Frost Lord. If you go for the meat, it's because you're more concerned with feeding yourself. And so they're like, no, this has to be about aggression. So they weed out the ones who are concerned about their self-preservation. Keep in mind that when I said earlier that they rarely eat them, I'm referring to them as like full adults grown and being used as cavalry, when they're pups, and if they fail any of these tests, they'll go ahead and eat them then. And so that defines kind of the major things that separate Beastclaw Raiders from other Oggurs in the mortal realm. So what makes them cool? Right, why is this army so unique? The first one, very simply, is the model range. They have a super dynamic, highly detailed, very new kits. They weren't recently released, but I mean, they are relatively new compared to other stuff. They have tons of bits. This is a great place. It's an impressive looking army. And really, this gives us a kind of different insight into Gork and Mork, or when they're combined into one, Gork and Morka, in that other forces that we've met so far, they all seem to have this very tribal, religious tone towards him. And this is one of the few ones where we have a more concrete presence. By that I mean, they see the storm as him and him in the storm. Whereas like Bone Splitters, it's just in the spirit of beasts, so we hunt big beasts, and Iron Jaws, it's just in battle, and we all love Gore Drac, right? These guys, no, like their evidence and manifestation of their god is continuously at their backs. It motivates and permeates every single aspect of their lives, and I think kind of gives us a more well-rounded view of that deity. They're also interesting because they are in perpetual threat of the storm, right? I mean, one could call them the hamster on the wheel, and the only way to get, to survive is you have to go faster and to move more and move more and move more and move more. You're never going to outrun the storm. It's going to keep up with you. But the trade-off being the storm is both a detriment to you, meaning a punishment, as well as a provider. Like we said earlier, the storm sometimes kind of sweeps ahead of them a little bit and freezes their enemy, gets them trucked in snow, softens them up so that when the Beastclaw Raiders come in, they can just devour everything. And when I say everything, another cool point to bring up is that these guys leave no trace behind. Because you have all the beasts are eating raw materials for buildings and things like that, as well as the Oggurs themselves eating anything living. So these guys are like locusts that just devour everything in their path in very, very small packages. And even though they haven't been used in the Black Library novels very much, I do like the fact, and I want to point this out as my last thing about why they're cool, is that they do acknowledge Gore Drac as the herald of Gorko Morka, right? There's something pulling them towards him, something magnetic about him. Even though he's a different race, even though he's a vastly different type of destruction model, there's something about him in relation to their god and the storm that's going on that is pulling them towards him. So I look forward in the next year to seeing some Beastclaw Raiders get into some action. And folks, those are my thoughts on the Beastclaw Raiders lore. And if you have a lore topic you'd like to discuss, go ahead, click subscribe, and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single comment and respond to as many as I possibly can. If you'd like to support me in a more personal way, head over to the 2+ Tough store, and I have some gaming mats on sale set in the realm of death, which will be perfect for the Malign Portents campaign. And if you can't do that, that's perfectly fine. I'm just so glad you spent some time with me here today. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Thank you so much, and happy wargaming.